Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty. If you're new here, my name is Melanie. Welcome, and my returning art and craft friends. I'm so glad you're taking another creative break with me today. Today I'm going to be showing you step by step of how I created this pumpkin full of Halloween kitties. I'm a part of a YouTube collaboration called Tricksters with Treats. We have 4 hosts today. We have Marina with the Secret Craft Room, Monica with Up All Night DIY, Dawn with Shabby Meets Bling, and Marina with Marina's Corner. You're going to find the links to the channels inside of the description box, as well as the playlist for all of the other tricksters who are going to be bringing you treats today. Make sure you click that playlist. I'm sure you're going to be inspired to create something really fun for your home for Halloween. Well, let's get started and I'll show you the beginning steps.
For this project, I decided to use a carvable pumpkin. I bought this one at my local Joann Fabrics. It's a great price. It's the end of the season, so it was 75% off. I have not used one of these before, so I thought a serrated knife would be the best. I wish I had used a smaller one, maybe a steak knife perhaps with a pointier tip and a little bit stronger serrated edge, but it worked okay. Once I had it cut, I decided to go ahead and paint it on the inside as well as the outside using the Waverly chalk paint in the color pumpkin. It took about 2 coats of paint to get this covered. I had wished that I had done a little bit of rubbing alcohol on the insides of the surface. There must have been some sort of oil, probably during the production time, that didn't allow the chalk paint to adhere too well on the inside. To help me paint it a little easier on the outside, I went ahead and just put it on the top of a little container, turned it upside down, so I was able to quickly go around and it was easier to get all the way around on the edges. To create the kitties, I found some styrofoam pumpkins at my local Walmart. They worked great. They can paint easily with chalk paint as well. I used a black chalk paint to do my black kitties. You might want to use gloves when you use this. I'm a messy painter. And then I used elephant for my gray kitty and just a white for my white kitty. I found this paper mache witch hat at my local Joann Fabrics, and I decided that I would paint it in a candy corn pattern. I started with black at the bottom of my witch hat, making sure I did get some on the bottom as well. On the very tip, I started with the white, did a couple coats of that, let it dry, and then I used the color pumpkin that I had used on my other pumpkin pieces. Let that dry as well. And I didn't measure, I just went ahead and eyeballed it as I went, and that looked okay. Apple Barrel's Golden Sunset worked really great for the yellow part of my candy corn. To add a little bit more interest to my pieces, to my pumpkin, and to my kitties, I went ahead and I put a coat of the Waverly wax on the top. It worked great for aging the pieces and then adding a little bit more depth to that color. It also seals the chalk paint really well. I simply just brushed it on and then wiped it off with a cotton rag. And it really does add a beautiful patina to these pieces. To be able to anchor my kitties down inside of my pumpkin, I simply just glued some of the styrofoam to the bottom of my pumpkin. Lots of hot glue. Once I had my glue down, I just held it down for a while and let my glue dry. It seemed to hold really well. The first detail pieces I was going to create for my kitties were the ears. I decided to use black felt for his ears. I wouldn't have to sew them. They're easy to cut and be able to glue. A key for working with felt is to make sure you have very sharp scissors. I usually use my fabric scissors for this process. The sharper the scissors, the easier felt is to cut. I simply just went ahead and doubled my fabric over and created ears 2 at a time, and that way I made sure my ears kind of match for each one. To add just a little bit more interest to my ears, I took some coffee-stained fabric, doubled it up, had made sure I had enough for each of my kitties, and I went ahead and doubled it over and cut some more triangles. I like this fabric because it does fray easily, so once I had my little triangles cut for the inside of my black felt areas, I was able to take the fabric and then roll it in my hand and create even more of a frayed edge. It's a nice little added detail to those little tiny ears. I added just a dab of hot glue in the middle and then stuck my little tea-stained, coffee-stained fabric in the middle. And I liked the way that looked. To create the little noses, I used the black felt as well, just cut them into small little triangle pieces and place them on my pumpkin. The area that I chose was at the top of the rib. I guess those little lines on pumpkins are called ribs. I think, and I placed it right into the center of a ribbed area. On each side of that nose, I'm going to be adding whiskers, so that was a great place to be able to add them. I wanted to make sure I showed you how I created the whiskers. I had lost some footage while I was filming, so I went back afterwards and just showed you how I did it using a plain pumpkin. To create the whiskers, I used some of the Aunt Lydia's crochet thread in the number 10 weight. I threaded 2 pieces of the thread through my doll needle. I was using a 5-inch doll needle to be able to create the whiskers. I was able to go ahead and just tie a knot in the end for the length of guessing how long I wanted to make my whiskers, and then was able to use my doll needle on one side of my nose and push it all the way through and pull it out the back, and where that knot was, it would stop the whiskers. And there I was able to create the whiskers, and all I did was simply cut it off the back, and I have some whiskers. I'll show you the rest of the steps of how I use them in the end. I went ahead and cut just a little bit here and there to make them a little irregular and cut the size that I needed. Always make them a little longer than what you think, and you can make them shorter when you're done. You could add a little bit of clear glue if you wanted to at that knotted area. To create a little bit more whimsical nature to my whiskers, I took a little bit of the tacky glue, put a small little dot on my finger, and then I rubbed it into my whiskers and coated them. This was going to do 2 things. It was going to make my whiskers stiff, and then it was going to allow me to go ahead and position them in a little bit more of a wonky style, going up and kind of crimping them and bending them and giving them a little bit more interest than just hanging straight down. To create the eyes, I used small black buttons. I threaded them with some embroidery floss in an orange color. I always like the detail of having my buttons have a little bit of thread on the inside. I used hot glue to be able to do this. I think one of those tiny hot glue guns with a small precision tip would probably work the best because these buttons were so small. So to help to get some of the glue out around my eyes, I took a chopstick and used that to wipe some of that glue out. I don't like seeing all that messy hot glue around my eyes. Once I had the eyes on, I went ahead and I placed my ears using some hot glue, just popped them on the top and glued them on there. To create their little mouths, I used a Posca pen in black, just drew a straight little line down, and then added a little dot at the bottom. They're just very irregular smiles, but I thought they were pretty cute on these little kitties. They're coming together, just absolutely darling. I did add a little bit of coffee stain on their whiskers just to tone them down just a little bit. And I did add green eyes on that black kitty, but in the end I do switch them back to a black eye. I wanted to add a little bit of blushing onto the cheeks, so I used some cadmium orange color and the Deco Art paint, and I dry brushed that onto the cheeks. The brush is a little deceiving. It looks more red than what it really is on my brush. It's actually more of an orangish red. And I put a coat of that on all of my little kitties' cheeks. I found these little holiday printed fabrics at Joann Fabrics. They were part of their Halloween collection. I wanted to use some fabric to decorate the pumpkin, as well as make some festive colors for each of my kitties. To create the ruffled collars, I ripped fabric about 1.5 inches wide, used my doll needle threaded with some Aunt Lydia's black crochet thread, and then went back and forth with my needle to create the ruffle. As you're gluing the ruffle on, you're going to want to pull it out loosely. This way you're going to have enough to go all the way around your kitty and not be too short at the end. The ruffle collars not only make your kitties look adorable, it will also fill up some of your space, open areas when you put your kitties inside of the pumpkin. Because the kitties are all the same size and there's no flat areas, the little ruffles will fill up some of the space so you don't have such big, large open areas. And here they are, all done with all their little ruffles on them. Each one has a little different color. Super cute, right? I wanted to add a little bit more pattern to my pumpkin, so I decided to go ahead and use the same fabric that I had used to create the kitty ruffles around my kitties. I went ahead and I ripped the fabric anywhere from 1 inch to 1.5 inches wide, and then I glued it halfway around my pumpkin, starting on the one end and then gluing it on the bottom. By only going halfway around and gluing it at the bottom, this just held the fabric down tighter. I continued around my pumpkin, putting the wider pieces of fabric all the way around, making sure I wasn't going to end with the two fabrics of the same pattern next to each other. I decided to add a small ribbon with a black background and a white dot. I like the idea of having the additional color of the black, and adding the different width of ribbon really added another interest to this pattern around my pumpkin. After looking at my kitties, I decided to make a last-minute change. You know how that goes. You look at things and then you decide, maybe one of these little guys doesn't quite belong. And I thought the white kitty was too white and needed to be toned down. Because I used the Waverly wax is a water-based wax. So I was able to go ahead and add some water to it, and then I went ahead and scrubbed it over my white paint, toning it down. It just made him look like he belonged to the rest of the group now. To create a big old bow for my witch hat, I used the same fabric that I had already used for the collars for my kitties and for the pattern on my pumpkins. I'm not a great bow maker, but using the bow dabber really does help me make a bow that looks somewhat decent anyway. Here you see me trying to make sure I have all of the side of the pretty fabric up. And the way you want to do this is to run your fabric across, but then go ahead and flip it when it's on the other side so you happen to see the raw edge of your fabric. So you can see me flipping it over so you see the unprinted side. Once I have the unprinted side over, I go ahead and cross it over, and now I have the pretty side once again. Go ahead and cut it, and then add another piece of fabric. And do the same thing for all your fabrics, making sure you're flipping it back and forth so you have the pretty side up. It does really make a difference. It takes a little bit of practice to be able to do it, and like I said, I'm not that great of a bow maker, but I can make a decent bow with a bow dabber. I wanted to say a special thank you to our hosts today, Martina, Monica, Dawn, and Marina, for hosting today's Tricksters with Treats Halloween collaboration. These ladies are super creative, so you definitely want to take some time and check out the links to their channels inside of my description box. We also have a whole bunch of other creators who have joined this playlist, so click that playlist and you'll be able to see all of their creative videos for today's event as well. As you can see, my bow is getting bigger. Another nice thing about using the bow dabber is that you can stack other things besides fabric in between there, and it holds it quite easily. I used a little bit of Excelsior in between my fabric, just to add another layer of whimsicalness to it. Once I had all the fabric layers, I pulled up my jute twine that I had used to be able to tie my bow with, and just simply tie it off in the middle. It's a great little tool to help create these bows. To finish my bow off, I added a black button in the middle, and then once I had it on the hat, I added a little bit more Excelsior to add a little extra whimsy to my bow. When putting my little kitties inside of the pumpkin, the little wooden skewers helped a lot to be able to have those anchored into my kitty, and then being able to slide it down into the styrofoam in below just helped anchor my kitties inside. I wanted to make sure I had them placed close to the front and close to each other to make them look like they were all snuggled inside of my little pumpkin. I had 5 kitties to place, so I wanted to make sure some of them were at different heights. For my black one, I decided I would like to have it stacked above the 2 that I just put in. So I had the skewer to be a little bit longer so it could poke down easily inside of the styrofoam and be anchored tightly once I put it in there. The other little gray one, I decided to go ahead and make it snugged in to the side of the white one. With having the 5, this would be 3 in the front, 1 in the very back, the black one, and then I had the orange one to be able to place. The orange one was going to also act as a way for me to attach something to the witch hat. So I had something to anchor my witch hat to, is the right way to say it, I guess. For the pumpkin top, I did put it on the very back. I used some long wooden skewers and I pushed those through my pumpkin, and then I pushed the skewers down into the styrofoam and anchored on the top of that. Now you wouldn't have to add the witch hat on. You could call it done like this. But I decided I really wanted that witch hat on, so I was able to go ahead and anchor it to the top of my orange kitty and apply a little bit of glue to the pumpkin top to anchor it. And it all came together. This was an item I did see on Facebook. I guess it was in a magazine a couple years ago. And I guess the women's magazine is no longer available, or it's no longer published. But I thought it was a great idea, and I added my twist to it as well. It's a great little Halloween decor. I love my little kitties, and this one looks great. To fill in some of the smaller gaps, I took a little bundles of Excelsior and made little bundles and then glued them in between and filled in the gaps. It acts as a gap filler and also adds to the extra whimsy to this piece. This sweet little Halloween piece is going to be sitting on my fireplace mantle out on my 3-season porch. I think it's sweet as can be. If you're new to my channel and you like to do art and crafts, come on over and check out what I have to offer. I do weekly drawing and painting tutorials as well. If you made it this far, thanks for watching today, and hopefully you'll come back and see me again, and next time you'll create right along with me.